to kick us off with our first Fireside chat, and that's an interview with a very special individual, and that's Dr. Albert Bourla. Before I hand it over to you, Stelios, I want to thank you for all of the work that you've done as a board member of the USAIC. And Dr. Stelios Papadopoulos is a very unique figure in our industry. He's a scientist and a physician who's also taken an interest in business. And he's the chairman of great companies, Biogen. He's chairman of Exelixis, for which he was also a founder. And he's been one of the great and most spirited entrepreneurs and innovators in our industry. So Stelios, with that, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Supreme Commander. As always, flattering to death. Thank you, Andy. So let's get started. So he already tweeted last week that the two of us were chatting this morning and invited everybody to join us with a cup of coffee. So what I did is I made a proper cup of coffee to make him jealous, and I'm gonna drink it. So,
well, unfortunately, I have to stay with the industrial version of coffee and not the homemade Greek or Turkish coffee that you're having there.
Well, in fact, just to get a little bit cultural discussion here, we used to go always Turkish coffee, and of course it was Arabic coffee that became Turkish coffee, and then we had some issue with Turkey, which we do every few years. Then we decided no more Turkish anything, so it became Greek coffee. But whatever it is, it's good. So happy coffee to everybody. Good afternoon, good early evening to all of our friends in India. It's tea time there. It's now 6:15, and as many of you know, we are being broadcast live via CNBC India. So hello and greetings. And we should start. Look, there are a lot of things we can talk about, but clearly the focus of the world is on COVID, and Pfizer has been front and center in this battle. So we should start with COVID, and hopefully this time we can move to other subjects. So the first question I would pose is the following. You know, when roughly a year ago, when people began talking about vaccines, a bit more than a year ago, and the word messenger RNA vaccines came up, most people thought it was reasonable for Moderna, that for a long time had been involved in that space, to be one of the participants in that undertaking. It was more of a surprise to see Pfizer doing, because I suppose most of us did not know what Pfizer had been doing for some time in the background. So, Albert, if you could just shed a little light on the history of the relationship with BioNTech and Pfizer's early activities in that space, and then how you came about. I know you've talked about this in many forums, but it's a great story of how you decided to move forward aggressively and essentially bet the whole company on this program. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stelios. And although they made a great introduction to you, I think they didn't say that you have been not only a good friend, but a mentor to me over the last several years. And I think you have helped me shape a lot of my understanding and beliefs of this industry, and thank you very much for that. Coming to the mRNA, I think the real question is not that people were expecting from Moderna maybe because they didn't know about Pfizer. The real question is how Pfizer decided to do it, because there was a very counterintuitive decision. For Moderna, for example, that you mentioned, or for BioNTech that you mentioned, this is what they do. They do messenger RNA. They are very good at that. So for them, the decision was, shall we try to make a vaccine against COVID or not? It was not a question which technology to use. In our case, the big question was, if we decide to make a vaccine for COVID, to go for it, which technology shall we use? Because we had great expertise with basically all technologies. We were working very actively with vector technologies like the one that AstraZeneca or J&J is doing. We were working very actively with protein and recombinant protein vaccines like the one that Novavax is doing. And we were working, something that people don't know, with mRNA technology since 2018. This is a collaboration that we started with BioNTech at the time so that we can disrupt the flu market. The flu is characterized by vaccines that they are not very effective. They are depends on the year. if you are lucky, it could be from 20 to 60%, but on average, they are at 50 or below. And we thought that a new technology like that maybe could create very efficacious vaccines that could do something differently in the flu. So we were working on that for already, let's say, 2 years when COVID hit. And then when discussing with my head of R&D, we decided that in addition to therapeutics that we're working, we need to go for a vaccine because the world will need a vaccine. I posed the question, so how are we going to go about it? So what will be the technology? And my scientists are the ones that came and told me that let's do the mRNA. And I told them, are you sure? Because that will be not only the first COVID vaccine, that will be the first vaccine ever if we succeed with that. And they told me, we know, but we are working, we think the technology is mature and we think now is the time to be able to do it. And then I said, and are you sure? Because now time is of essence. And if we go with mRNA, we will have to go with a partner. And clearly that would be BioNTech because we were working with them. And then again, they said, we know them, we have worked with them. They are the right partner. We think we can do it. And I said yes. And but it was counterintuitive. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that's fabulous. But there's another element to this whole decision making that you've shared with me and others, having to do with sort of like the personal relationship and how, you and your counterparts at BioNTech sort of like decided to see eye to eye and move forward. So you can just share a little bit of that story, because it's more than just writing a contract, having the lawyers negotiate it, signing, and 6 months later starting. Time was of the essence here.
That was a very, very pivotal moment. I didn't know personally the management of BioNTech when my team told me go for mRNA. And I told them yes. But then I said, let me call the CEO of the company. I want to understand what we are dealing with. And we hit it off from the first call. We discussed on principles rather than on what we are going to do. And then he talked to me about his life, and then I talked to him about my life. And then we decided to call again next day. And we started building a very close relationship. So at a certain point, we said that, Ugur, Ugur is the name of the founder of BioNTech. And Ugur, together with his wife, founded that company. And I told him, if we are to do something like that, time is of essence here. It's going to be very challenging to put together all the legal documents and the contracts and start after that. We are going to miss the train. He said, yeah, I know. And then I said, so how you think we can do it? He said, maybe we start and then worry about the contracts later. I said, from my perspective, that's the way to go. Do you feel comfortable? Yes. Yes, I feel comfortable. So we started working immediately. The next day, there was a meeting with the people. They transfer all technical knowledge, and then they send us samples, and then we send them materials. And we signed 3 weeks later a letter of intent, because our lawyers had already heart attack that we were exchanging all this information without a legal formal document signed. So a letter of intent, at least they felt, describes our intent. And then we signed a high-level licensing agreement, which was basically who will take the cost of this development program. 3 weeks again later, 4 weeks later. And then we started working. And the people maybe know, maybe not, that the commercial agreement between Pfizer and BioNTech, which is a very thick document that describes how we sell, who gets the rights, how we share all these billions. It was signed in January of 2021. And we were operating basically on our word and good intent and the letter of intent for all these months. And that only if you have this level of trust, you can do it. And I did. And the funny thing, Stelios, is that we spoke about Turkish coffee before. It is that Ugur and his wife, they are Turkish, they are Muslims, and they are immigrants in Germany. I am Greek, I'm Jewish, and I'm immigrant in the US. He's very introvert, very science-driven. I'm rather than an extrovert. We are very different personalities, but we have a very common element that it was a deep respect from one another.
Well, I can tell you it's that is for sure an important point. But just on the cultural side, look, we've been arm wrestling with the Turks for a few hundred years in our part of the world. At the end of the day, we need to appreciate and admit we have more in common than we have differences. And when we find each other to be good people, we form great bonds. And kudos to you for overcoming sort of like basic historical, ethnic challenges and doing it. But more importantly, doing business the old-fashioned way, on the word of honor, and particularly for a problem that loomed so large that had to be solved. So I applaud you. And by the way, just to erase any misconceptions, I've taught Albert nothing. We've known each other a long time. You should know, not only we're both Greek, we're born in the same hometown, and we're sort of like grew up in the business nearby each other because our father said stores nearby each other. I've taught him nothing. I cook for him once in a while, and he likes my cooking, but that's about all I've contributed. So let me get back to the vaccine issue. As I'm thinking back, of all the things in terms of the evolution of the vaccine, sort of like the design of the mRNA construct, the formulation, the planning and execution of the clinical trials, manufacturing, the logistics of distribution, what ended up being, in your mind, the biggest surprise in terms of challenges? Or were all the same, or was it all complex and at the end it got solved?
Look, undoubtedly for me, the biggest surprise was the level of efficacy that this vaccine was able to accomplish. We didn't expect something like that. We were expecting something on the 70s, and we were hoping for it. And FDA was ready to give approval at the 50s, if you remember. This is where they had set the limit. And that was something that really, really surprised us. And we could only see it at the end when we opened the kimono. That was in November 8th when we unblinded the data. That was clearly a very big surprise. The rest were not surprised, but there were a lot of challenges. Because I would say that there were two different miracles, if we can call them like that, that happened. One was that we were able to develop and run the studies and get it through the finish line in such record time. But equally challenging and equally impressive is what we did with manufacturing. The fact that this year we'll be able to produce 3 billion doses from scratch, nothing last year, in a product or in a technology that didn't have any infrastructure, manufacturing infrastructure in the world. It was not that similar products were produced somewhere in the world before, so there was someone that can make them. There was nothing. We had to design from scratch the formulation machines. And then once our engineers designed them, we ordered them to make them they made to order. And then they deliver back to us so that we can start ramping up manufacturing. That, for me, was the biggest challenge. And I was surprised, I was pleased also to see that we were able not only to do 95% efficacy, but also to do that level of production so consistently. That was a very big deal for me.
So I have one more question for this, so like early part of the historical part of the vaccine, and then as our illustrious leader, Karun, has insisted, I need to open it up to the audience, and a number of people waiting to ask you questions. But the last question I would have, and I got many more for later if we have time, Operation Warp Speed, was it meaningful? Was it really helpful? Was it just political headline grabbing? How did it affect Pfizer and perhaps even some of the other companies in your mind?
No, I think it was not very homogeneous. So what I want to say is that for some, it was political, but for many of the people that were working on the Operation Warp Speed, they had the best of their intentions, and they tried very hard to help, and they did help. I don't think that they gave the same help to all, because not everyone needed it.
Well, you specifically chose not to take federal money.
We didn't take federal money, and we did it because we felt that we are all in. And if you want to move with the speed that we wanted to move, and eventually we're able to do it, you need to have independence. And it's not that it's not that the advice of others is not actually worth a lot. But taking money from federal government comes always with strings attached. So these are taxpayer money, so they have a responsibility, and as a result, they want to be involved in decisions. They want committees, and they want to discuss how you are going to do the clinical trial, and they want, if you want to make a change, they want to go back to the committee and see why you changed the protocol. These things were happening within 5 minutes in our decision process. Gathering all the people, they were saying, this is what we see. Some will say, let's go left. Some will say, let's go right. And then I'll say, okay, we go right. That's how it was happening, right? And that wouldn't be able to do it when you get all the money from. But we didn't need also the money, right? It was a very big ticket item. I said it's 2 billion. So we're way ahead of it right now in terms of how much it cost, the whole effort. So if the vaccine was failing, we had to write off, let's say, $2.5 billion. It wouldn't take Pfizer down. We wouldn't, let's say, bankrupt. It was going to be very painful, right? And anyone could feel it. But so it was not that the company will disappear. So I decided that if we are all in, this is how we do it. And then I spoke to the board, and they said, yes, go ahead. But I think the fact that I don't think, for example, that Moderna had the financial resources to do it alone in the speed that they did. So it was a good thing that they gave them all these resources that they needed so that they can run the studies.
Excellent. Look, this was truly a courageous decision. And, all of us are applauding Pfizer as well as the other companies who've participated because, we all out there, most of us are alive, fully vaccinated and about to start doing business the usual way because of all of this effort. So thank you again. So let me turn to some of our participants. I know Chris Feedbacker, whom I see on my screen, has a question, although I don't know what it is. So it's a surprise question. So Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Stelios. Thank you, Albert. I now have Pfizer in my blood after your vaccine. So, as I listen to you, I'm hearing a guy that decided to bring in some previously unapproved technology from a relatively unknown biotech with some challenging thermostability, spent vast amounts of money while declining money from the government. I'm hearing boldness. I'm hearing words like counterintuitive, all in, speed, no contract. You started work 3 weeks before an LOI is even signed. So I'm thinking, wow, I'm listening to a CEO of a really innovative biotech, but I'm not. I'm listening, and with respect, I'm listening to the CEO of Pfizer. Now, this is a surprise to me. We don't really hear leaders of large corporations who are first and foremost thinking about returns and thinking about how do I avoid risk. And you've taken, as Stelios says, something that would cause many CEOs to quake in their boots, which is to take a courageous decision. Tell us about what this has meant for you as a leader and what you're trying to do with Pfizer. And how do you see Pfizer coming through this COVID? And do you see a new Pfizer, a different culture? Has this been this must be a pretty momentous time within Pfizer to see Pfizer taking the lead in a public health emergency like this.
Chris, thank you. Still, I remember our meetings in Paris, and very nice to see you. I think we need to put, first of all, these decisions in the context of the time that we are discussing. So it was unusual times. The world was collapsing in front of us. So in a sense, as a CEO of Pfizer, I was somehow converted to someone that can affect the world, not only Pfizer. I knew that what we are doing goes above and beyond the future of Pfizer. It is about the future of the world. And I knew that if we are successful, we will be able to contribute to the world what it needed. And if we fail, we have bigger worries to deal with, because the whole world would be in a mess right now if it would fail. So that helped what we call now a courageous and brave decision. It helped me to make it much easier, because I knew that there was only one way to go ahead. You couldn't just don't do it. But that being said, really, the fact that we started later than many others and we finished earlier than anyone is not what you would expect from a big bureaucratic corporation like Pfizer, which is huge and has impact. And that was something that we were preparing for. Pfizer started to change way back in the times of my predecessor, when he was able to turn around the R&D machine. So when I took over in 2019, what I found was a very different R&D machine. And then I could bet on this machine and transform the company. So it was very fast, the transformation that happened when I took over in 19, but it was only because of the work that Ian has done before. And what we did immediately, within 6 months, let's say, of the first 6 months, we found better homes for 2 of the 3 businesses. So we focused only on the science business, and we increased dramatically the R&D and the digital budgets, dramatically. And we brought also new talent, particularly in digital. I brought the first chief digital officer. And the first goal that they had was to digitize the R&D operations. So we started a very intensive, let's say, effort that was able to find a digitized clinical operation group ready to run a study in a very different way. And that helped a lot. I don't think we would be even near to the speed that we were able to conclude the clinical study if we hadn't done all this investment in infrastructure in the year and a half before. But also the most important thing was that, as you said, it's not the resources, it is the mentality. A biotech, particularly an owner-based biotech, they are calling the shots, they are moving fast. We had to change this culture in Pfizer. And the culture that we already launched, let's say, a year and a half ago, was like if it was tailor-made for a moment like that. The first word of the culture was courage. We were building our mental exercise, how we can be courageous. And we defined it, what it means, courage. It means think big. Don't think how we can do something in 10% better. How we can do it in 10% of the time. It was be decisive as part of be courageous or speak up. How many times someone, the last moment before we press the button, because we had the culture that I speak up, said, frankly, I think if we go this way, that could be very dangerous. I suggest the other way, and then we moved. So that helped a lot, this project. We had the value of equity. Imagine if we were in front of this big decision. We were having a price that was reflecting the value that the vaccine brings to the society. That was the natural and intuitive thing to do. At least give the vaccine at a cost that it is similar to every other vaccine of this technology. We gave it to something like 10% of that price to the high-income countries. And we gave it half of that price to the middle-income countries. And we gave it at cost to the low-income countries. Because equity is not to give the same to all. Equity is to give more to those that they need more. But that was already in our DNA. So all of these things could have gone the completely different way or wrong way if we wouldn't prepare for that moment. And I'm very pleased because we didn't expect it to come that soon, but it was a major test of our claimed new Pfizer. And I think I'm proud that we passed with flying colors.
You can
Chris,
certainly
what you described,
very inspirational.
Chris, what you described in so eloquently, I will not repeat what you said and what Albert just said, is the question of can a big pharma company think, act, and have the priorities and the principles of a aggressive, smart fair-minded biotech company, and everybody should want to do that. It's just that this was one of the way, as Albert said, and the pandemic was a catalytic event. But look, you remember, you and I were talking many, many years ago, when you went into Sanofi, you coined a term. You decided what you need to do was de-Sanofize Sanofi, which is essentially bringing Sanofi out of the dark ages, into more of a biotech mind. And obviously the Regeneron transactions, the Genzyme transaction, all those went a long way, to rehabilitating the company. And frankly, at this point, most of the value is in those capabilities. Pfizer was well on the way, and I think the pandemic certainly helped. And I think more than anything, not because Albert is my friend, his determination and his principles were critical in this transformation. It wouldn't have happened, with perhaps somebody else at the helm. So maybe I can turn to another one of the people who have suggested to be part of this conversation. So could I turn to Lalit Jha, who's got a question? I see him on the screen in front of me. If you can unmute your microphone. There you
go.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this. My question is probably about the audit of FDA facilities in other countries. The physical audit of facilities have been impacted during this pandemic, including those in India of the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you please share the experience and plan to scale up FDA's remote interactive evaluations? And if you can also share some of your plans about your presence in India. Thank you.
Yes. Look, I mean, FDA, I think, rise to the occasion during this pandemic in a way that they should feel very proud. They were able, of course, audits, I think, across the globe, and they didn't have any specific experience with that during that period, other than the normal interactions. But I know that audits, any type of audits of the FDA were slowed down during the pandemic because, of course, they couldn't visit. And I think they rightly so, because when you operate this type of facilities in the middle of a pandemic, the worst thing that you want is people getting in and out of this pandemic. So I think they did extremely well. I don't know what else can I add to your question. Can you be more specific?
But has that impacted the manufacturing of these facilities where FDA does inspection, and is this new mode going to help in some way?
Look, if you're speaking about in general medicines, it was one of our biggest priorities. Maybe it's not that known because COVID vaccine basically was something that covered everything. But my biggest worry when it started was not only the COVID. Actually, the immediate worry was that hospitals, if you remember, in February, and already we knew from China in January, they were overcrowded. And Pfizer is one of the largest supplier of injectable products in the world. We were doing at that time 1 billion doses for every year. And my concern was that for a lot of these products, likely we'll see a demand that will be 30, 40, 50% higher for some of these products than normal. And that we will be having, as the economy was shutting down, we will be having problem to maintaining our operations in this manufacturing site because of restrictions, healthcare restrictions, right? So that was what kept me up a lot of nights in the beginning, not the COVID-19 vaccine. We did fantastic, but I would say that we did fantastic because there was a lot of dedication and self-sacrifice of employees. I was concerned that people will not show up in their business because, of course, we started operating under very strict protocols of hygiene. We had, during the pandemic, in all these manufacturing plants, less than 1% absentees, which is almost the norm, right? So people, despite the fact that they were afraid about the COVID, they would show up into the job because they knew that what they are doing is going to affect the lives of millions. That went very, very well. Now, when it comes to COVID, clearly, as I was saying before, there were not manufacturing lines suitable to produce any mRNA vaccine anywhere in the world. And so we designed them from scratch. And we installed them from scratch. And in fact, we installed something that we never did before, infrastructure and capacity that could do, let's say, billions of doses. Just to give you a magnitude of the size, Pfizer's annual peak capacity for vaccine was 200 million doses last year, right? In 2020. And in 2021, we will make 3 billion only of a new vaccine that didn't exist before. So we needed to set up lines, and we needed to do it in a very expedient way, which was not typical of doing this type of jobs. For example, we couldn't afford to build buildings. So because it was a must to install this capacity, we found ways to bring pro-cut buildings. Already, let's say, modules that were pre-built that we transferred from places like Texas, that there were some big manufacturers, to Michigan, and we had to close all the streets while we were doing this transfer of this huge module. But we could do in, let's say, in 5 months, 6 months, what would take us 4 years to build. And these were the things that we had to do. We are a highly regulated industry. Without the active collaboration of FDA, that would go and will do inspections overnight in these facilities, and will give us their feedback very quickly. So what we have to change so that they can approve it, etc., etc. Nothing of that would be possible. This is why I say that I don't think the regulators, and particularly FDA, that was the champion, got the credit that they deserved during that period. I mean, they got a lot of credit, but really they were equal heroes than the people that developed the vaccines in BioNTech, in Pfizer, in Moderna, in J&J.
Well, we have probably time for one more question. If I could ask Dr. Naresh Trehan to come forth and join us. If you could unmute your microphone.
Good morning to all of you on that end. Good evening to my friends in India. I can only echo what the previous speakers have done by complimenting you, Albert. But
thank you very much.
Listening to your story of your decisiveness, your guts, I think you're a heart surgeon at heart. You would have made, you're in the wrong profession, you would have made a great heart surgeon. That's from one to the other. So coming back, I am very encouraged and delighted to hear that you just told us that you will be manufacturing 3 billion doses this year. As you know, India is facing multiple problems or challenges, you should say, more challenges. I think the government has done a great job, by the way. But in spite of what we have been able to do, we are, given the size of our population, we are way, way, way behind. And also the fact that the adage that nobody is safe till everybody is safe still holds true for this virus especially, because of the mutations that we see on a daily basis. So my question to you, and it will be followed by a request, is that where are you in your thought process, in your engagement with the Indian government and authorities, to be able to make it possible for India and Indians to be beneficiaries of this very efficient vaccine that you have produced? And the request part of that is, we are estimating, and we hope we are wrong, that the third wave which we are expecting in India, by the time it comes, we would have vaccinated at least 50–60% of our population, but the children will go totally unprotected. So you are the holder of that key, because you have done the incredible work of testing it in children and saying, and prove that it is safe for the children. Can you, in your thinking and negotiations, since you are lion-hearted, is to give relief to the children around the world, especially I would make a request for India, ASAP, so that we can catch up with their vaccination also. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for your question. And clearly the situation that you described is very accurate. And it is, India went through hell, frankly. And I think they are now, the efforts that they are doing are working very well. Let me give you the global, and then I will go straight to the Indian. We will produce, we are comfortable that we will make 3 billion doses this year, by the end of this year. We are very comfortable that we will do 4 billion doses next year. So only from one company, there are going to be 7 billion within 2 years. So I think if others will do also what they are thinking they are going to do, I think pretty soon, let's say beginning of next year, the world will have a lot of doses available for all. So we don't have to make choices who gets it and not. 7 billion is not for the poor or the rich, north or east. It is for all. From those, we made a specific pledge that mid and low-income countries, and India clearly falls into this category, will receive at least 2 billion doses, and then at least 1 billion this year. So I'm confident we will exceed this number, but we made the pledge that at least 1 billion this year and then 1 billion next year. And we recently also were able to conclude a deal with the US government that 500 million of these 2 billion doses will be given not even at cost. US government will subsidize the cost. It will give to them at cost, and then they will give it for free to many countries. With India, we are discussing right now with the Indian government, and we are in a very, very final stages of finalizing this agreement. First, we need to get approval of this vaccine in India to be able to import it, right? So we don't have that yet. And, but I think we are in a very good way to get it approved, and then to have a sign an agreement that will allow us also to send doses of our vaccine to India. Also, I want to remind that the immediate thing when the crisis became so obvious in India, again, was not the vaccine, was how to deal with the people that were dying this same day, as we were thinking, in hospitals. And they were dying in many cases because not enough of this life-saving medications were there. So Pfizer donated and worked with the Indian government so that it was not that easy, right, to bring all these medicines to India. The 4 of the most critical medicines in the ICUs, in the intensive care units, that we took from the list that the Ministry of Health of India produced, we offered enough quantities, and these were products that we were having. We offered enough quantities for every patient in every public hospital in India. And we started already, days after this commitment, to ship from all over the world these medicines. I think those have saved tremendous amounts of lives already. And we continue doing that. So to answer your question, I hope that very soon we will finalize the approval of the product in India by the Indian healthcare authorities and the agreement with the government, so that we can start also sending vaccines of our side. India right now has, and I think that will be their biggest backbone, a significant local manufacturing of vaccines, of the AstraZeneca vaccine that is happening in the Serum Institute. And I think that will provide, in any case, the backbone of vaccinating the Indian people. But getting the additional mRNA vaccines from us and hopefully from Moderna, I think will also contribute significantly.
Well, this is a tightly run meeting, and I
Thank you very much.
Over time, even by a minute. So I'd like to thank all the participants, particularly Albert for his inspiring and candid remarks. And I'd like to turn back to the Supreme Commander. So, Alberto, καλή αντάμωση, καλή δική.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Priyank, could you put the polling slide, please? I hope you guys had a chance to go through the poll. This will be open for 1 minute, this poll. So please look at the question, give your answers. The poll is only open for a minute. So going forward, please look at all the questions there in the menu tab on the right side and at the bottom. So we have a few more seconds left. We do see some good responses. So come on, look at it. As COVID-19 vaccines continue to enter the market and get distributed, what is the next priority in COVID-19? 30 seconds left. You have only 15 seconds left. Please do your polling, and we'll have the results immediately after this break of 5 minutes. And that's the end of polling. Thank you so much. Thanks for your help. See you after 5 minutes.
Welcome back, everybody. And I'd like to just give a big thanks to Dr. Bourla and Dr. Papadopoulos. And amongst the many things we learned, and this is not surprising given Stelios's many, many talents, is that he's a good cook. And he's actually cooked for Dr. Bourla. So Stelios, we're all waiting for our invitation to your house for a home-cooked Greek meal. With that said, before we introduce the next panel, let's please put the polling results up on the screen and let's see how everybody responded. I am just gonna put it on large. Great. So overwhelming results. So the question was, as COVID-19 vaccines continue to enter the market and get distributed, what is the next priority in COVID-19? And we have an overwhelming winner, which was A, increasing global access to vaccines and therapeutics. So thank you all for participating in this poll. We'll have polling throughout the day, so please stay engaged. We'd love to hear your thinking on the various topics that we will be putting in front of you.